Hello and welcome to WION Live Broadcast from London. I'm Ollie Barrett, and in this bulletin we'll bring you a roundup of stories developing around the world. First up, the headlines. The US Senate is set to vote on a stopgap funding bill to prevent a government shutdown. With just hours to spare, lawmakers are staring at a number of deadlines with huge stakes for the economy. A French court handed former President Nicolas Sarkozy a one-year sentence for illegal financing of his 2012 re-election bid, dealing a fresh blow to the right-winger 6 months after a conviction for corruption. Tightening a loophole, New Zealand passes a new security law criminalising preparing and plotting a terror attack, bringing security laws in line with many other countries. In Kabul, the Taliban once again cracked down on a small group of women protesters by firing shots into the air. The women were demanding the right to work and education. Britain says the gas station crisis caused by panic buying is back under control, but many pumps remain closed in London, leaving motorists searching or queuing for hours to fill their tanks. And a top Rohingya leader, Mohib Ullah, is shot dead by unidentified gunmen in a refugee camp in Bangladesh's Cox's Bazar. No one's been arrested yet and no one has claimed responsibility so far. And we will start with some breaking news and a former Metropolitan Police officer who murdered Sarah Everard after kidnapping her under the guise of an arrest has been sentenced to a whole life prison sentence in the last half an hour. Wayne Couzens abducted the 33-year-old as she walked home from a friend's house in Clapham here in London on the 3rd of March. Ahead of sentencing Couzens, the judge said the case was devastating, tragic and wholly brutal. "You've betrayed your family and there's no evidence of genuine contrition," he told Couzens. To New Zealand next, and the country has passed a new security law to criminalise preparing a terror attack. The law tightens a loophole in the justice system that was exposed by a man who went on to conduct a mass stabbing in the country's most populated city. New Zealand has spent months moving to strengthen its security laws amid heightened fears of lone wolf terror attacks. But the new law was rushed through Parliament after Atil Mohammed Shamsuddin stabbed and wounded 7 people in a supermarket in Auckland in September. Police shot dead Shamsuddin, a 32-year-old Sri Lankan national, moments after he launched his knife attack. He had been convicted and imprisoned for around 3 years as he attempted to join the Islamic State. He was released in July. New Zealand had in 2020 unsuccessfully sought to charge Shamsuddin with terror offences after he bought a hunting knife and was found with Islamic State videos. Shamsuddin had also made internet searches, including keywords such as Islamic State dress, enemies of Allah, ISIS allegiance, heroes of the Islamic State, and also safety and security guidelines for lone wolf mujahideen. However, it wasn't established under the previous law that he intended to use a knife to launch an ISIS-inspired terror attack. Following the revelations, the Jacinda Ardern government vowed to change the law. New Zealand's Justice Minister Chris Fafoy says The nature of terrorism has changed, going on to say, across the world there are more lone actors rather than larger organised groups. A top Rohingya community leader, Mohib Ullah, of a refugee camp in Bangladesh's Cox's Bazar, has been shot dead. 5 assailants thought to be involved in the shooting are believed to be in hiding. According to police, Mohib Ullah was speaking with other refugee leaders outside his office after attending evening prayers when the attackers came to the spot and shot him dead. The police say Ullah had not alerted them to any threats from any group. Authorities have stepped up security, deploying hundreds of security personnel in the area. No suspect has been apprehended yet. According to his group, the Afghan Rohingya Society for Peace and Human Rights, Ullah was talking to other Rohingya leaders outside the body's office at Kutu Palong, the world's largest refugee settlement, when an unidentified assailant shot him at least 3 times. A spokesman for the group says he was in a pool of blood. He was brought dead to the nearby MSF hospital. Many Rohingya leaders have gone into hiding after his killing. Mohib Ullah was 48. He emerged as the main civilian leader of the persecuted Muslim minority community. No one has claimed responsibility. AFP news agency, quoting sources, says Ullah is believed to have been killed by the extremist Arakan Rohingya Salvation Army, which was behind several attacks on Myanmar security posts in recent years. Nearly 750,000 Rohingya took refuge in camps in Bangladesh after a military crackdown by the Myanmar army on their villages in Rakhine province in August 2017. Video sharing platform YouTube has cracked down on users spreading misinformation about COVID-19 vaccines. YouTube says it will remove videos and high-profile users that claim approved vaccines are dangerous. The platform has already banned posts spreading misinformation about COVID treatments. YouTube says that its concerns about the spread of medical conspiracy theories go beyond the coronavirus pandemic.
Under pressure to combat misinformation on its platform, YouTube announced on Wednesday it will block all anti-vaccine content on the streaming site. YouTube already cracked down specifically on COVID-19 vaccine misinformation, but will now target content alleging that long-standing, commonly used vaccines cause chronic health effects. The Washington Post reported that YouTube, owned by Google parent Alphabet, will take down several channels and ban prominent anti-vaccine activists, including attorney Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and Joseph Mercola, who have long been high-profile figures in the anti-vaccine movement. The move comes as YouTube and other tech giants, such as Facebook and Twitter, face criticism for not doing enough to stop the spread of false health information on their sites.
And they're killing people.
U.S. President Joe Biden in July said COVID-19 misinformation spread on social media was, quote, killing people. Even as YouTube takes a tougher stance on misinformation, it faces backlash around the world. Moscow on Wednesday expressed outrage after YouTube deleted a Russian state broadcaster's German-language channels for what the site said were breaches of its COVID-19 misinformation policy. Russia called the move, quote, unprecedented information aggression and threatened to block YouTube. Google did not immediately respond to a request for comment.
Here in Britain, the country is still struggling to contain panic buying that left fuel pumps dry across the land. On Wednesday, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson said the situation was stabilising. The panic buying was triggered by reports of a shortage of fuel at a handful of petrol stations because of a lack of lorry drivers. And now the haulage industry has a cautionary message for the British Prime Minister. Truckers say the crisis will have a knock-on effect on prices of food and gifts and the supply of food and gifts as well in the run-up to Christmas.
An air of chaos has gripped the world's 5th largest economy, the United Kingdom. A deficit of truckers left fuel pumps dry. A spike in European wholesale natural gas prices tipped energy companies into bankruptcy. And what many believe to be one of the biggest contributors to this crisis, Brexit, resulted in a shortage of around 100,000 truckers. Tens of thousands of them returned to the European Union. The pandemic added to the woes. Around 40,000 driver tests were cancelled during the COVID lockdown. A day after, the British Prime Minister assured that the fuel crisis is stabilising, truck drivers have a cautionary message for Boris Johnson. They say prices of all goods, from food to Christmas gifts, will rise because an acute shortage of drivers is ratcheting up wages.
If there's no truck drivers, you look what happened with the fuel, right? If we all down tools, look what will happen. This country will ground to a halt within a matter of, not days, in a matter of hours, you know? So, at the end of the day, look, someone's got to do something to sort it all out, but prices will increase, nothing ever changes, it won't change.
At Clackett Lane service station, beside London's M25 orbital motorway, drivers from all across Europe were parked up to rest after their journeys. They all spoke of a hard and lonely life on the road, and that wages would definitely have to rise.
I do on average 65, 66 hours a week. Who wants to do that? And you're away. So, like, I go home, I've got, if I'm lucky, I'll get home on a Friday night. And then I've got 48 hours in which to do all I need to do. See my family, see my kids, you know, see my grandkids, my washing, my shopping, everything else. Got to do all that. And then back out on the road again. So who wants to do that? Young people won't, they don't want to do that, you know. It's not a job. It's not a job for young people. It's a marriage killer.
Hauler companies are struggling to fill trucker jobs. On September 26th, the government announced a plan to issue temporary visas for 5,000 foreign truck drivers. But not many of them want to take up the offer.
This job is hard. It is not good. Well paid? Well, what can I say? Not really, since I work 13 to 14 hours a day. Like it or not, but 13 to 14 hours a day should be paid better. I think so. Young people do not want this job. I am 37 years old. I agreed to this job because due to the coronavirus, I lost my position in a hotel.
No one else has these kind of problems that you're finding here. It's because of Brexit. The borders, the checkpoints, the health and safety and extra checks, the loss of time at the borders and checkpoints, all those kinds of issues because of the new paperwork. The extra paperwork the factories also have to carry out now. This will also result in a monumental loss in terms of the UK's economy.
Like Patrice, many other truck drivers across the European Union blame Brexit for the shortage. They say Brexit prompted many of them to head for the exit. A claim that British government keeps denying. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
Top US defense officials say the Taliban takeover of the country can be traced back to the deal struck between the Taliban and the Trump administration. In February 2020, the then US government and the Taliban signed the Doha Agreement, which set the date and terms for the US withdrawal. General Frank McKenzie, testifying in Congress, said the deal dealt a harmful blow to the Afghan government and its military.
I think the Doha Agreement and the signing of the Doha Agreement had a really pernicious effect on the government of Afghanistan and on its military. Psychological more than anything else, but we set a date certain for when we were going to leave and when they could expect all assistance to end. So for the first time, there was something out there in front of them.
In addition to setting a withdrawal date, the Doha Agreement included broad obligations from the Taliban to take steps to prevent groups such as Al-Qaeda from threatening the security of the US and its allies. After his election, US President Joe Biden continued with the plan for withdrawal, but with an end date of the 31st of August instead of May. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin agreed, saying the agreement had helped the Taliban get stronger. He said he did not support keeping troops in Afghanistan forever. He also admitted at the hearing that the Afghan army collapse took everyone by surprise.
But I would say that, in my view, there was no risk-free status quo option. I think that the Taliban had been clear that if we stayed there longer, they were going to recommence attacks on our forces. I think while it's conceivable that you could stay there, my view is that you would have had to deploy more forces in order to protect ourselves and accomplish any missions that we would have been assigned.
General McKenzie also said the troop reduction ordered by President Biden in April was the other nail in the coffin. Top defence officials had earlier said they'd recommended keeping a force of 2,500 troops in Afghanistan ahead of the full US withdrawal in August.
It's been my position and my judgment that if we went below an advisory level of 2,500, I believe that the government of Afghanistan would likely collapse and that the military would follow. And one might go before the other, but I believe that was going to be the inevitable result of drawing down to zero. And I've expressed that opinion in writing for quite a while. Now, so taking a look at that, that was sort of my best judgment on that. I believe that so going below 2,500, I think, was the other sort of nail in the coffin, if you will, that allowed the Afghan government, that led to conditions where, first of all, we could no longer see what was happening to the force because our advisors were no longer down there with those units.
The US defence officials made the comments on Wednesday in testimony to the House of Representatives Armed Services Committee. The hearing took place nearly a month after a much criticised US withdrawal from Afghanistan. And it has been more than a month since the Taliban took over Kabul. Many promises were made regarding women's rights that have faded away already. Women have been told to stay at home and cover up. Their right to attend Kabul University has also been stripped from them. Now a small protest of 6 women has been dispersed by Taliban gunmen. These women were calling for their right to education to be restored. Recently, a Taliban-appointed chancellor said that female students will not be permitted to return to Kabul University until a real Islamic environment is provided for all. Taliban gunmen also stopped journalists from filming the latest incident. Women have been demanding the right for girls to return to secondary schools ever since the Taliban excluded them from classes earlier this month. In this protest, banners were held which read, "Do not politicise education," and "Education is human identity." The Taliban says these demonstrators did not coordinate with security authorities regarding their protest. We have seen small rallies across multiple cities, including Herat, since the Taliban seized power. These protests, however, have become fewer in number since the Taliban government warned of severe legal action for anyone breaking the rules. The Taliban's strict interpretation of Sharia law segregates men and women. That in turn has compromised many women's right to work. Take the case of Barno TV, a TV and radio network that was owned by women and employed only women. It has now been shut down. Meanwhile, reports suggest that more than 220 female Afghan judges are in hiding due to the fear of retribution from the Taliban.
It shows the future and
Next up, RollsRoyce, the luxury car maker. It's set to make the switch to fully electric cars like we've seen Volkswagen's Bentley and Jaguar's Land Rover announcing that they would do. The BMW-owned brand says it will produce only electric cars by 2030. Rolls-Royce says its first fully electric-powered car, called Spectre, will be on the market in 2023 and the testing will begin soon.
Rolls-Royce is to go all-electric by 2030. The news came Wednesday as the luxury car maker revealed some first glimpses of its debut EV. The Spectre will go on sale in late 2023, with testing set to begin soon. Company boss Torsten Müller-Ertvos says the brand will then progressively ditch combustion engines. Current cars from Rolls-Royce are anything but zero-emission vehicles. Now, though, it follows rival Bentley in making the switch to electric. And it's ahead of parent firm BMW, which has set no end date for gasoline-fueled motors. Back in 1900, the company says founder Charles Rolls described electric cars as perfectly noiseless and clean, and very useful, if only charging stations were available. More than a century later, that moment may finally have come.
And finally, after a long-awaited world premiere in London, the latest James Bond film, No Time to Die, has hit theatres. It's the 25th James Bond movie. It marks Daniel Craig's fifth and final outing as the famous spy. Since Bond's big-screen debut in 1962, 7 actors have played 007. But who is the best James Bond, and when will the next one be announced?
The year was 2004. Actor Pierce Brosnan, who by then had appeared in 4 James Bond films, had just delivered the highest grossing entry in the franchise at the time, with Die Another Day. As Brosnan geared up for another Bond appearance, he was told by producers that his services would no longer be required. Following his unceremonious sacking, 36-year-old British actor Daniel Craig was approached to portray the famous agent. Craig's first response was that he was unsure and reluctant, though he finally came around. The casting choice raised many an eyebrow. Some found his height, 5 feet and 10 inches, to be objectionable since his predecessors had been over 6 feet tall. For others, he wasn't handsome like Roger Moore or Pierce Brosnan, or even dark-haired for that matter. Despite roaring criticism, Casino Royale's production went ahead. The film premiered in November 2006 and made over $594 million worldwide, making it the highest-grossing Bond film at the time. Craig's performance was praised by even his harshest critics, who said he brought a new dimension to the character.
We have an Ocean View villa.
Perfect. His portrayal of the secret agent invented by author Ian Fleming is indeed astonishingly different from Sean Connery's, who was the first actor to bring the sleuth to the big screen in Dr. No in 1962. Australian actor George Lazenby, English actors Roger Moore and Timothy Dalton, as well as Irish actor Pierce Brosnan have been the other actors who got the license to kill. But who is the ultimate 007? Everyone has their favorite Bond. For us, it's Craig. And viewers agree, his Bond films have made a staggering sum of $3 billion in box office receipts worldwide.
Of all your pain.
Daniel Craig's fifth and final outing as Bond has led to a frenzied speculation about the identity of his replacement. And then there's the question of representation. Should the iconic role go to a black actor, or can a woman play Bond? Craig himself has said that there's no room for women to play the role. Others disagree with him. Barbara Broccoli, the producer who has been involved in the franchise for over 40 years, has revealed the search for a new James Bond won't begin until 2022. So this debate is likely to rumble on. Bureau Report, WION. World is One.
That's all we have time for on today's WION Live broadcast from London. The name is Barrett, Ollie Barrett. For more global news and updates, stay tuned to WION. World is One.
This is right, Arab.